Hey everyone, how you doing? IntoWeapons back again with ya. Got the VMAC45-100 on the bench today, and I was going to do a quick disassembly video for you. Typically, I would normally include a cleaning portion to this type of video, but the cleaning was very straightforward on this firearm. It is already cleaned, so as I go through the disassembly for it, what I'll do is kind of just summarize what I did for the cleaning. Hopefully that'll help you out, and it won't take as much time to have you guys go through the disassembly and reassembly process. So this again video is going to cover the VMAC45, which is by Velocity Firearms. The disassembly process is also the same as the VMAC9-100, so if you have the 9mm version of this firearm, this disassembly video will also help you. There are just a couple differences, so kind of pay attention for those differences, as it is pretty important. So what you would need today in order to do the disassembly on this firearm will be a punch, a pretty significant diameter punch, and that's just to help get the pin out that holds the lower and upper receiver together. Sometimes that can be a little tight. You'll need a 5/32 inch wrench, or I'm sorry, hex wrench or Allen wrench. You'll also need a Phillips flathead screwdriver, which I find helpful to pry the upper from the lower, as it is a pretty tight fit. So again, we'll go ahead and get right into it, guys. What we have is the firearm itself with the 30-round mag. It is in the safe position. What we'll go ahead and do is drop the magazine away from the gun. We'll set that aside. We'll go ahead and make sure that it is empty by charging the handle a couple times and making sure that it's clear. You can also look inside there, make sure there's nothing in there. For the VMAC45, the 45 ACP version, it does need to be in a decocked position, or you have to have the trigger pulled in order for it to be disassembled correctly. For the VMAC9, you want to make sure that it does stay in the cocked position, so make sure that you have that trigger ready to go. Since this is the 45 ACP version, what we'll do, go ahead and decock the trigger. So what we're going to do is rotate it into the fire position, point it in a safe direction, pull the trigger, and now it's in a decock position. We can rotate this back to the safe position, and we're pretty much ready to go at that point. There is a pin up here in the front which holds the lower and the upper receiver together. It's got an Allen head on that side and just a flat kind of bevel on this side, really nothing there. If you can't remove that by hand, which is probably good, you'll need to have the 5/32 inch wrench, and we'll go ahead and just loosen this up. It's not very difficult. At that point, once it gets loosened, you should be able to remove that by hand. And it is a short screw. It's just ultimately holding this pin which runs through in there. And what you can do is, if you can't kind of work this free with your fingers, sometimes they're loose, sometimes they're tight, you can just go ahead and use a pin, drive punch I should say, and drive this pin right through, just like that. You can see it sticking out there, and remove that out. Pretty simple. So we'll go ahead and set those two things aside. Now that we have those two pieces, or the pin removed, we can go ahead and remove or separate the lower and the upper receiver. The best way to do that, guys, is to use a flathead screwdriver here and just kind of put it right into the little crease here that there is and kind of twist. And that will separate these two pieces, as you can see there, pretty easily. If you have to really crank on it, there's a possibility that everything's going to come flying apart on you. And ultimately, when you do the disassembly, you want to make sure that you're kind of pointing it in a downward direction so your bolt does not fall rearward. So you have your lower receiver here, which includes your trigger group, your mag well, and just the lower receiver itself. And then you have your upper receiver, much like an AR-15. Again, you don't want to hold this up like this because you don't want your bolt to come flying out like that on you. So you kind of want to have it in a downward position. Once we have the upper and lower separated, what we can do is remove the bolt, and what we're going to do that is just make the bolt carrier all the way to the back here, and then pull the charging handle right up and out. When you're doing the reassembly of this, we just have to make sure that we're putting this bevel in here, as you can see on the top of that. That notch that's cut out there is for your sights, so you got to make sure that's vertical with the gun itself. So once we have the charging handle removed here, the bolt will just slide right out. There you go. You'll have the upper receiver, which includes your barrel, and you'll notice that the barrel is nickel plated on this one as well. I think some of the older versions it is not. I think it's just a regular black blued version. And then you have the bolt and the bolt carrier. And it's a pretty interesting design. It's got the striker there, the firing pin. Kind of a blowback design that kind of pushes this back and does all the action in this one little block here. Not going to do a disassembly of this bolt. What I'll end up doing is probably a separate video on that sometime in the future. I haven't really looked into that. This is actually as far as the owner's manual recommends that you disassemble to do maintenance and cleaning. So that's as far as you really should probably go. Again, I'll probably do a disassembly of the bolt in the future, but I'll need to look into that a little bit further. So now that we have that all done, guys, what we're going to do is reassemble the firearm. If you have the VMAC9, your firearm should already be cocked, and you won't need to worry about that step. If you have the VMAC45, like I have here, what we're going to need to do is cock the trigger, cock the hammer. So what we're going to do is engage it by pushing this back here, and you'll hear a click. And now it's engaged, and you'll see that your mag well is open and free. Just real quickly, I'll go over what I did for cleaning, guys. Ultimately, when I broke it down like this, I used some CLP. I didn't decide to use any kind of strong solvents on this gun, mainly because of the finish on it. I didn't want to tarnish or hurt the nickel plating on this, but it looks like it withstood the cleaning of the CLP really well. So it looks like the nickel plating isn't going to go anywhere if you use a light solvent like that. What I did is I just kind of used a brush, and I brushed everything down, including the lower receiver inside here. Used a Remington oil wipe, and I just kind of wiped down all the remnants and solvents out of there. I did the same thing with this. I used a brush and just kind of brushed everything off, guys, and then came back with a Rem oil wipe and cleaned that up. I did use a brush, or a brass brush, here on the firing pin area there, the bolt face, just because I wanted to get a lot of the stuff that was left behind by the ammunition on there, so that worked out pretty well. And then inside here I just kind of used a Remington oil wipe to just kind of wipe around the edges and get into the corners. I saw that there was a lot of buildup in the actual corners of this square here of the receiver all the way down. You can almost assume that that all of these edges in here act as rails for that bolt that's moving back and forth in here. So then I went and used just a little bit more of a stronger solvent in the barrel, which is the Smith & Wesson Bore and Action Cleaner. I put that down there and used a brass brush to clean that out, got it as best as possible. For 100 rounds it was extremely dirty. I just had I think I did 3 or 4 passes with my brass brush, 3 or 4 different rounds of passes I should say, and then going back with a clean patch and using some CLP to get the fouling out, but it was extremely dirty. So once I was done with all that, guys, it's pretty much just a one Rem oil wipe to clean everything up again. A lot of the Rem oil wipe leaves a good film behind inside these parts and pieces that will protect from corrosion, things of that nature. And then it was just reassembly, and that's what we'll go ahead and do right now at this point, guys. So the VMAC45, we have the trigger activated here, the sear down into the whatever it is, and we'll go ahead and put the bolt back into the upper receiver, which is just going to go right back in like it came out. And you want to keep this part of the bolt here facing downward. That's where the round is being stripped off the magazine well, and it fits in there pretty perfectly. You'll be able to test that. We'll go ahead and move it back to that opening where the charging handle will go in. Again, we'll just drop that in, make sure that our notch is lined up with our sights so it doesn't affect our line of sight. We'll go ahead and make sure our guide rod and stuff of that nature is in position and back into the original spot it should be, just like that. We'll go ahead and kind of at an angle here, guys, go in like this. Again, I'm kind of got it pointed down so my bolt isn't sliding back on me. I think my guide rod here kind of slipped out. There's a little guide rod on here that isn't held into place by anything, just more or less gravity. I'll show you here. It's this little rod here, it just fits into this hole in the back. There we go. But if that comes loose, it'll fall right out of that hole. It doesn't hold in with anything else. Slide that back forward. And once you get the upper and the lower, again, kind of in position, is a little bit more difficult to do because I'm using kind of my body to press it together. We're going to just compress it in the front here until your holes line up here where you can put your pin back into position. I don't know if I got it here. There we go. You'll be able to tell because you can look right through it and see if you have any obstructions. We'll go ahead and replace our pin that holds everything together there, just like that. Make sure it's nice and tight. we'll go ahead and replace our screw that holds that pin in place. And what I do is just hand tighten, and then we'll use the 5/32 inch hex or Allen wrench here and just go ahead and tighten it. You don't want to really tighten it too much. In fact, it doesn't really look like it wants to really tighten down, so it must kind of have a fail-safe in there for over-tightening. And then at that point you should be completely reassembled. We'll go ahead and test the charging. Everything looks like it works there. We'll go ahead and switch it to the fire position and test to make sure it's the trigger's working. It is. Go ahead and retest it again. Looks like it's working, guys. Put it back into the safe position. I cleaned up the magazine with just a Rem oil wipe and the brush on the inside there. And we're set to go. So that's kind of the disassembly and reassembly, including just kind of a summary of the cleaning of it for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching, and until next time, take her easy.